Hey guys, how's it going? All right, this is part 5 of the Dr. Phil show concerning the Zimmerman case. So let's go ahead and get started with it.
Did you ever have those kind of conversations with him that it is a failure to pull that gun and pull the trigger?
All right, this is where it left off, and I had said in my last clip that it's never a failure to pull your gun and use it when it's the proper time to do so. And Dr. Phil's suggesting that it's always a failure. And like I said in the end of my last video, he's so full of crap his eyes are brown.
Well, something close to that, I would probably say. We went over many things. George at the time.
And I can't believe that his friend said that there's something close to that. Yeah, it's a failure to pull your gun. How stupid. Why have it?
Round and was face to face with Trayvon. According to what he told us, there is no time. It was a matter of we're within an arm's reach of each other. I was struck in the face. I fell down on my back, and in no time, his knees are up here by my ribs, and he's pummeling me. There was no option. When things happen in a split second, according to what he told me, there was no time to think, to go through a decision process. Sometimes that happens. Sometimes you just don't have that time.
Was this an all or none situation? Did he have to pull that trigger?
I believe 100% yes. And I'll tell you why. When your head has been bashed on the ground and you're close to blacking out and you have the concussion that he had, there's that thought process of I'm going to pull it out and I'm going to strike someone with it. If there was another way to preserve Trayvon's life, George would have taken it without question. Without question.
And that's pretty obvious, seeing that George let Trayvon beat on him for that length of time. You know, if it were me and Trayvon had punched me in the nose and had mounted me, I would have pulled my gun out and shot him right there. I mean, at the point that he's sitting on my chest, that's it. He's already broke my nose. He's punching me. That's all it takes. We're done here. And I wouldn't be worrying about who he is or, his family. That wouldn't be going through my mind. The only thing that'd be going through my mind is my family. I need to get home. I need to take care of my family. And whoever this guy is that decided to jump on me, he forfeited his rights.
It's important to say also that George did yell for help. In his mind, he said he thought that the police were on the scene and they were looking for him. So he was trying to yell for help as loudly as he possibly could so that the police would be able to find him and yank Trayvon off, and then everything, works out a different way.
He also was yelling to people directly to get them. He was seeing people.
And there are witnesses that say it was Trayvon that was yelling for help, not...
Yeah, witness number 5, Marykutcher, says that. And it's funny because this Dr. Phil doesn't want to point out the facts. He says, yeah, well, there was witnesses. Yeah, there was Marykutcher who said Trayvon was yelling. But as I had already said in the video that I made about Marykutcher, and you can scroll through my videos and find the one that's got her picture and it's the blonde. I go over her testimony, and absolutely she never sees what happens. In fact, she doesn't even make it out of the house until after the shooting. And when she comes out, she sees George over Trayvon. Looks like she thinks he's giving Trayvon assistance, like maybe some CPR or something, trying to heal or make him better, find out what's wrong with him. So, she said she thought that it was Trayvon screaming based on the noises she heard. But if you go listen to the video that I made, she doesn't hear any yelling for help, so she really doesn't even hear the voices. But she insisted that it was a little boy yelling. She kept saying, "It's a little boy. It's just a little tiny boy." Because she said that after the news reports came out and they showed George as this great big thick-necked guy and Trayvon as this little 12-year-old angel. And that's why she kept saying it was a high-pitched voice. I know it was that little boy. It was just a little boy. It couldn't have been that big man, So anyhow, if you want to find out the truth about Marykutcher and the witness that he's saying said that it was Trayvon, go watch the video. You'll see what I'm talking about. Marykutcher's an idiot. Thank you.
Correct. I'm sure.
People would say that.
Not long ago, George Zimmerman appeared during an interview with Fox's Sean Hannity. Now, during that interview, George gave a controversial response to one of the questions, and Mark has asked for a chance to clarify what he believes George really meant. Now,
And we all know what that is. George said that he thought it was God's will what happened that night, at least is concerning him, because he survived. And what he was meaning, and this is what George's friend will tell you, that George said he thought that God still had plans for him, and that's why he saved his life. That's why George lived. Not necessarily that Trayvon should die. But, as a Christian and as a follower of Christ, I've always been of the opinion that things happen according to God's will. And, even bad things. Bad things have happened to me in my life. And when I look back on those bad things, I can't even remember a bad thing that happened in my life that didn't eventually turn out to be somehow or another a good thing. Somehow or another, things just turn out good. And I believe there's a Bible verse somewhere that says, all things work together for good to them that love God. So everything, good and bad, works together for good to them that love God. And basically, George being a follower of Christ, he's going to believe these things. He's going to believe that God's in control and that things don't happen on accident, that God allowed this thing to happen, that he put all the pieces together. That's his opinion. I agree.
happened. Hannity, do you feel you wouldn't be here for this interview if you didn't have that gun? Zimmerman, no, sir. Hannity, you feel you would not be here? Zimmerman, I feel it was all God's plan, and for me to second guess it or judge it. Hannity interrupts. Is there anything you might do differently?
So there he is. He's just saying, God has his plan, and everything worked out according to God's plan. And, if you don't like that, it's too bad. A lot of people are going to say, how can you say that? God's plan is not that a 17-year-old child dies. Well, then you're saying that God's not in control. You're saying that God doesn't have power over these issues. So, that's your opinion, and that's fine. But other people disagree. There are a lot of 17-year-olds that don't attack people and they die. Let's see. I'm trying to think of the guy's name. I can't remember his name now, but there was a guy that got attacked by a drone. An American guy got killed by a drone that Obama shot at him. And remember, Obama takes credit for all drone attacks because he said drones don't shoot people unless I order them to. So he's got the power over the drones. So this guy died, got killed. But then, like a week later, his son gets killed by a drone while he's having a barbecue with his friend, his cousin, and they both get killed with a drone. This kid's 16 years old. He didn't have any warrants for his arrest. He's an American. He went to school here. Really, a nice kid. And Obama ordered his murder. I mean, unless they can prove that there was some reason to shoot him, it's murder. That's just the way the law is written. You have to have. I mean, it's murder unless you're defending yourself. Then it's self-defense. But I don't see how Obama could say that he was defending himself by shooting this. Well, I think the kid was 16. But remember, Trayvon's a child, and that guy was just a terrorist or something, Right. Every day.
Now that the time has passed a little bit, Zimmerman, no, sir. What do you want to say?
It was clear to us what he might have meant. George has said to us, I've heard him say the God's plan thing, and that was, God must have a plan for me to have allowed me not to have died that day. So that I could see easily how that could be turned into, well, was it God's plan that Trayvon perished that night? Absolutely not. That's the opposite of what.
Yeah, but maybe that's what he was meaning. But if you ask me, and probably most people who believe in God, we would all agree that nothing happens without God's knowledge. Nothing. And the Bible says something about that talking about sparrows, that not a single sparrow should fall except the Father should know, and that how much more important we are than than these sparrows are. And so basically what the Bible is telling us there is that people are much more important than sparrows, but God knows every time a sparrow falls. So obviously he knows what's happening with the people. And he knows that Trayvon was going to die that night because God has foreknowledge. So yes, everything that happens is God's plan. The true, faithful people believe that God has a hand and foreknowledge of everything. Sure, we have free choice and we can choose the minor issues in our lives, but the major issues that happen, when we're going to live, when we're going to die, all that stuff is predetermined. God gives us certain abilities to avoid bad things happening to us, but a lot of times those bad things that happen to us by our own choice are things that were caused by our actions or whatever. Well, God knew that stuff was going to happen, and that's why it happened at that time, because that was his plan.
He would have meant at all.
Anywhere in your mind, under any theory at which you would say it's even a possibility that he made a mistake?
I can't.
Okay, all right, then let me ask it this way.
He really wants this guy to say George made a mistake, and he's going to ask it every way he can until he finally gets the answer. The answer is no, George made no mistakes. Well, let's continue and I'll explain why.
If he had this to do over again, would you advise him differently?
With a crystal ball, I would have probably advised him that your thought process of getting out of the vehicle, even though he may have misinterpreted what the dispatcher was trying to relay to him, and that is, if you don't still see him, we may not even send an officer, or if you don't see him, let's just let this one go.
See, and those were the 2 points that the 2 points he was making were totally wrong based on the evidence we have. And the reason I say that is if you listen to the dispatch call with George, this never came up. Never did the dispatch say that they weren't going to come or any of that other stuff. Never did the question come up, do you still want the cops to come since you can't see him anymore? But that's what he's suggesting, and that's not right. And that's why, he's just got it wrong. In reality, what had happened is, if you remember back in the call, and if you go to my map/timeline video that I made I think a week or so ago, I lay it out exactly when George was told to keep an eye on Trayvon. And that was right after George was parked in front of the clubhouse, and Trayvon was there menacing him. And we heard Trayvon's voice, and we heard George there saying, get an officer here right away. And then the dispatch said, okay, let us know if he does anything else. So the words, let us know if he does anything else, is key. This is the point where the dispatcher's telling him, keep an eye on Trayvon, monitor his movements, don't let him slide out of your view. Of course, that's not what he said. He said, let us know if Trayvon does anything else. That's what he said. But there's no way to follow those instructions without doing the other, which is following, monitoring, keeping an eye on him, right? So this is the point that he's missing, and this is the point where he needs to tell Dr. Phil that what George was doing was fulfilling the original order, which was to keep an eye on Trayvon. That was the original order. And he got out of his car in that process of monitoring Trayvon and followed him. And then when the dispatcher said, we don't need you to do that, that's when suddenly the order to monitor and keep track of Trayvon was changed from, we don't need you to do that, which meant don't follow him. So that's when he stopped following him, turned around, and started walking back. Right? So that's the facts we have. So that's why I think Dr. Phil is, he's just not very bright when it comes to this stuff.
Don't see him. Let's just let this one go. So he got out of his vehicle to see where he was supposed to be, to see where if he could make eye contact with Trayvon. So
Exactly, and that's what the dispatcher had told him to do back when he was still in his car. The dispatcher said, okay, keep an eye on him, let us know if he does anything else.
Said to him, under no circumstances would you get out of your vehicle. That's not your job to get out of your vehicle and put yourself in harm's way.
And this is his buddy saying that this is the information he would have given George had he foresaw this. He would have said, listen, if you're in this situation and they tell you to keep an eye on him, and then you get to a situation where you have to get out of your car to keep an eye on him, don't do it. And that would be his advice. I disagree. This guy's in law enforcement, and he's just speaking from experience. He's saying it's dangerous. It's deadly. You could get killed. I mean, you get out of your car and you're in a precarious situation. And I disagree for several reasons. Number one, your car is one of your least safe places to be. People are saying, oh, he should have stayed in his car where he was safe. How do you figure you're safe in your car? I mean, do you think bullets can't go through glass or through metal? Do you think somehow sitting in a car as a sitting duck if you're in the car, you probably can't see out. If it's dark outside, you can't see anything except what the headlights are shining on. So anybody that would be walking up behind you on your left or on your right would have an advantage over you. They could just walk up beside your car and shoot right through and kill you right on the spot. And there is no protection there. If you get out of your car, now you've got even advantage. It's equal. The guy has the same 360-degree view as you do. So that's why I say, if you're in a situation where you're monitoring somebody and you lose track of them, you're safer out of your car than you are in your car. And that's my opinion, unless you want to say, of course you're much safer to get, stay in your car and drive away. You just take off. Whew, you're gone. That's safer, sure, but that's not safer for the neighborhood. That's not safer for the people in the neighborhood. Now that we know that there's a guy on the loose wandering around, and we know that there's single mothers with small children in the neighborhood, and this guy's just gone in that direction. He could be in any one of those apartments or houses.
So that was a mistake to get out of the vehicle?
Not necessarily. In his opinion, he thought the dispatcher wanted him to maintain eye contact.
And that's the truth. That's where he should say right now. And he should remind the doctor. At the point when the dispatcher said, let us know if he does anything else, that was the command to George to keep an eye on Trayvon, to monitor his movements, including getting out of the car. Of course, he didn't say get out of the car, but he didn't say not to get out of the car. And there is no law that says you can't get out of your car. He was perfectly within his rights. It was completely an issue of how far are you willing to put your life on the line for your neighborhood. The average guy isn't going to do it. If anything, he'd drive by, see Trayvon, and call the cops and keep on going to Target. That's the average guy. You won't, if you're talking about an above average guy, he's going to follow Trayvon and monitor his movements and stay in his car. If you want to talk about the above average guy, that's George. He's willing to sacrifice his safety to defend his neighborhood.
The dispatcher said.
Well, right.
The dispatcher didn't give any advice other than, we don't need you to follow him.
And that's where this guy is way off balance. He doesn't know the facts of the case. If he did, he would say, well, George was told to keep an eye on Trayvon. And remember, he said, okay, let us know if he does anything else. That was the commandment, and that was way before he got out of the car.
He had already gotten out of the vehicle.
She said exactly the opposite.
Yeah, he got out of the vehicle, right.
So if he's hearing what isn't said, he's also contradicting what he was told. We don't need you to do that.
Right, and he turned around and went back to his vehicle.
Yeah,
tried to go back to his vehicle. He said okay.
Okay, and
He closed his phone, he put it in his pocket, and as he turned around to return to his vehicle, Trayvon was within an arm's reach of him, and that's where the conflict happened.
Oh, we've got to take a break. Coming up, I'm going to add somebody to this conversation. We'll be right back.
All right, so that's the end of that segment, and basically the point of the end of that segment was that Trayvon, or that George had been told not to continue following Trayvon, but George had been told earlier to keep an eye on Trayvon and let us know if he does anything else, and George assumed that meant keep an eye on him, and the only way you can do that is once he goes around the buildings is to get out of the car and follow. So now we know that Dr. Phil is loose cannon that has no information on this case other than what was fed to him by his masters, because remember, he is just a peon. He tries to look all big and stuff, but I mean, if they fired him tomorrow, he would just be a poor guy. And personally, I don't much care for this guy, just because he's more concerned with making money than he is with the safety of people who are walking their neighborhood, monitoring their neighborhood, calling them cowboy vigilantes as if that's some terrible thing. Remember, the word vigilante means somebody who's being vigil, who's keeping an eye out, watching for the safety of their neighborhood. What's wrong with that? How is that evil? And the fact that the cops can't get there faster than 10 or 15 minutes, well, all the more reason to have a lot more people. And the fact that they only had a few people that were willing to do anything, it's kind of sad. I mean, I'm saddened by the fact that John couldn't even go over there and knock Trayvon off of George. That's what I would have done. I just would have gone over there, and I probably would have landed into Trayvon's shoulder with my right foot and sent him at least 5 or 10 feet away from George, and which would have left me on top of Trayvon, and I would have held him down, and that would have stopped him from being killed. He probably would have fought, and George could have got in there and helped me, and we would have held him down until the cops got there in a minute or so, and everybody would have been fine. But, unfortunately, George was there by himself with the whole neighborhood doing nothing. So, good talking to you guys. Talk to you later. Bye.